August 1944. Normandy. German field commanders study American supply lines through their field glasses and laugh. The Americans, they say, are moving too fast for their own good. Their logistics are a joke. They'll run out of fuel in days and hand us the counterattack we've been waiting for. They had no idea what was coming. The equation had flipped and nobody saw it coming. July 25th, 1432 hours. Operation Cobra explodes across the Norman hedgerows. In 72 hours, General George Patton's Third Army punches through German lines and races 200 kilometers inland. Tank treads churn up French roads at speeds that leave Wehrmacht observers stunned. Dust clouds rise from thousands of vehicles advancing faster than any mechanized force in history. But by August 2nd, those same tanks sit silent in the fields around Chartres. Empty fuel gauges, silent radios. The German generals were right about one thing. You can't outrun your supply lines, but they were catastrophically wrong about what happened next. August 1st, 1645 hours. Captain Wilhelm Hoffmann studies the situation map at German 7th Army headquarters. Blue arrows mark American advances that seem impossible. In 3 days, Patton's spearheads have covered more ground than German forces managed in 3 months during 1940. Hoffmann traces the supply lines with his finger, thin red lines stretching back to the Norman coast. Unmöglich, he mutters to his aide. They're extending faster than they can supply. Basic logistics will stop them within days. His aide, Unteroffizier Brown, nods enthusiastically. Herr Hauptmann, our intelligence estimates show American fuel requirements exceed port capacity by 7 to 1. They'll be walking soon. Hoffmann allows himself a rare smile. Mathematics doesn't lie. The Americans have overextended themselves into a logistics nightmare that will hand Germany its first major defensive victory since D-Day. The numbers don't lie. 28 American divisions burning through 20,000 tons of supplies every single day. Ammunition, fuel, food, medical supplies, spare parts, an endless river of materiel feeding the largest mechanized force in human history. But the ports are still smoking from German demolitions. Cherbourg can barely handle 3,000 tons daily. The math is simple and terrifying. 7 to 1 deficit. Pentagon calculations show 6 days until collapse. German interceptors smile. American tanks without fuel are expensive roadblocks. But what they didn't know was already rolling. This wasn't supposed to be possible. August 3rd, 04:15 hours. Deep in the Pentagon's basement planning room, Colonel William Mitchell stands before a wall-sized map of France covered in colored pins. Red pins mark supply depots, blue pins mark consumption points, black pins mark shortfalls. The black pins outnumber everything else by an alarming margin. His aide, Major Thompson, enters with fresh calculations from the logistics department. Sir, at current consumption rates, we have 144 hours before critical fuel shortage across all armored units. Ammunition situation is even worse. Artillery units are already rationing shells. Mitchell studies the numbers that could lose the war. 20,000 tons needed daily, 3,000 tons maximum delivery capacity. The mathematics are brutal and unforgiving. Unless something changes immediately, Patton's breakthrough becomes Patton's disaster. But Mitchell has a plan that defies conventional military wisdom. August 3rd, 23:45 hours. The secure phone rings in General Omar Bradley's command trailer. Mitchell's voice crackles through the encryption. Sir, we need every available truck in the European theater. Every single vehicle that can carry supplies. How many are we talking about, Bill? 6,000 trucks, sir, running continuously, day and night. No stops except for fuel and critical repairs. Bradley is quiet for 30 seconds. The request sounds impossible. 6,000 vehicles in constant motion across enemy territory, through bombed roads, under air attack. The logistics of the logistics operation alone seem overwhelming. Do it, Bradley finally says. Whatever it takes. August 4th, 05:30 hours. Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Rogers stands on a hill outside Valognes, watching the first convoy roll out. 590 trucks in perfect formation, headlights blazing despite the danger of German air attack. Behind them, another 500, then another. By dawn, 5,900 vehicles stretch across the Norman countryside in a mechanical snake that seems to have no end. Each truck carries 5 tons of critical supplies. Each driver has been briefed on the mission's importance. Each mile covered brings American forces closer to sustaining their impossible advance. The Red Ball Express is born in desperation, but it will grow into the most efficient supply operation in military history. The Red Ball Express is born. Coming up, the numbers that broke everything the Germans thought they knew about logistics. August 4th, 12:30 hours. The German intercept station at Falaise picks up American radio traffic about something called Red Ball. Obergefreiter Hans Weber, the station's senior linguist, hunches over his radio equipment, scribbling notes as American voices discuss tonnage quotas and delivery schedules. Red Bull control to all stations. Initial convoy departed on schedule. Expect first delivery at 14:30 hours. Tonnage target, 5,000 tons by midnight. Weber pauses his transcription. 5,000 tons in one day. That's more than the entire German Army Group B receives in a week. He must have misunderstood the transmission. American slang has always been confusing, but these numbers sound like industrial production reports rather than military communications. He has no idea he's listening to the death of their defensive strategy. August 5th, 19:22 hours. Staff Sergeant James Washington downshifts his 2.5-ton GMC truck as he approaches the first checkpoint on Route N7. Behind him, 5 tons of artillery shells destined for the 4th Armored Division. In front of him, an identical truck driven by Corporal Willie Banks. Behind him, another driven by Private Robert Johnson. The convoy stretches beyond the horizon in both directions. Washington checks his watch and odometer, right on schedule, exactly where he should be. The precision is military, but the scale is industrial. He's truck number 1,247 in today's convoy. Behind him, 4,653 more vehicles carry the materials of modern warfare toward the front lines. The irony cuts deep. 3 months ago, Washington was told he wasn't suitable for combat roles. Too risky, they said. Not officer material, but now the entire European offensive depends on his steady hands and sharp eyes. He's driving through sniper fire and artillery barrages to save an army that questioned his courage. August 6th, 08:15 hours. The first Red Bull convoy hits the main supply route. Truck after truck after truck, each one loaded with 5 tons of critical supplies. The spacing is perfect, exactly 60 feet between vehicles, maintaining 35 miles per hour through the Norman hills. German forward observers count vehicles until their hands cramp. 1 truck every 14 seconds, for hours. For days, for months. The math had flipped overnight. August 6th, 14:30 hours. Captain Ernst Hoffmann crouches in a bombed-out farmhouse 3 kilometers from Route N7, the main Red Ball artery. Through his Zeiss binoculars, he's been counting American trucks for 4 hours. His field notebook is filled with hash marks, each cluster representing another 50 vehicles. He's lost count twice and started over. The mechanical precision is almost inhuman. Every 14 seconds, another truck passes his observation point. No gaps in the convoy, no slowdowns, no apparent end. Hoffmann has been analyzing military logistics for 8 years, but nothing in his experience prepared him for this. He radios his regimental headquarters. Continuous American convoy observed on Route N7. Estimate several thousand vehicles in motion simultaneously. No tactical vulnerabilities identified. Enemy supply operations exceed all known parameters. The response crackles through his radio. Hoffmann, are you certain of these numbers? Jawohl, Herr Oberst. I've been counting for 4 hours. The convoy shows no signs of ending. There's a long pause. Then, submit written report immediately. Command will not believe this without documentation. Hoffmann looks back at his notebook, filled with thousands of hash marks. The Americans aren't just supplying their armies, they're drowning German resistance in an ocean of abundance. Staff Sergeant Washington grips his steering wheel as his GMC truck climbs another Norman hill. The summer heat makes his uniform stick to the vinyl seat, but he maintains exactly 60 feet behind the truck in front of him. In the passenger seat, Corporal Willie Banks checks their manifest for the 15th time. 5 tons of 105mm artillery shells. Destination grid coordinates 347892. Banks reads aloud. ETA 1645 hours. Washington nods. Behind them, Staff Sergeant Moses Williams drives an identical truck loaded with medical supplies. Behind Williams, Sergeant Floyd Davis hauls 5 tons of small arms ammunition. The convoy extends beyond the horizon, thousands of vehicles carrying everything an army needs to fight and win. The equation was brutal in its simplicity. American factories could produce anything the army needed. American ports could handle anything the factories shipped. The only missing piece was the road between the ports and the front lines. 500 miles of French countryside that had to be turned into the most efficient supply pipeline in military history. In 14 hours, what they saw next broke everything they knew about logistics. August 7th, 11:45 hours. Hauptmann Klaus Müller leads a German reconnaissance patrol through the woods near Argentan, searching for vulnerable points in American supply lines. His mission, identify convoy routes suitable for ambush. His 8-man patrol has been hunting for 2 days without success. The problem isn't finding American convoys. It's finding American convoys small enough to attack. Every road carries hundreds of trucks. Every path has been turned into a supply route. Muller's patrol spots isolated vehicles, but within minutes they're joined by full convoys with armed escorts. Herr Hauptmann, his radioman whispers, pointing through the trees at Route D26. Another convoy approaching. Muller raises his binoculars. 50 trucks in tight formation, flanked by jeeps mounting 50-caliber machine guns. His 8 rifles against 50 trucks and mounted weapons. The mathematics of small unit tactics have changed overnight. German forces aren't just outnumbered, they're drowning in American abundance. August 8th, 22:47 hours. The German observation post at Hill 117 overlooks the main Red Ball route through a sector of highway that stretches arrow straight for 12 kilometers. Unteroffizier Klaus Weber and his 3-man team have been counting American vehicles since sunset. Their mission, assess enemy supply capabilities for tomorrow's planned counterattack. Weber's notebook is filled with calculations that sound impossible. 1 truck every 14 seconds for 6 hours straight. No breaks in the convoy. No apparent tactical vulnerabilities. His pencil is worn to a nub from making hash marks. His wrist aches from writing numbers. Klaus, his partner whispers, how many does that make? Weber checks his calculations. 1,547 vehicles in 6 hours. At 5 tons per vehicle, that's 7,735 tons of supplies in one sector of one road in one night. The number is incomprehensible. The entire German 7th Army receives 800 tons per week on a good week. The Americans are moving 10 times that amount through one road in one night. Their report sounds like fiction. Continuous convoy observed, several thousand vehicles, no end visible. Enemy supply capacity exceeds all previous intelligence estimates. Their regimental commander's response, Weber, are you drinking? But what they saw next broke everything they knew. August 9th, 15:20 hours. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich von Luttwitz studies reconnaissance reports at Ixl 7 Panzer Corps headquarters. American supply operations described in these documents sound like industrial fantasies rather than military logistics. His staff officers have triple-checked the numbers, but the mathematics remain incomprehensible. Mein Gott, Luttwitz mutters, staring at charts showing American supply tonnage. They're not just supplying their armies. They're supplied for armies they don't even have. His operations officer, Oberst Dietrich, spreads aerial reconnaissance photos across the map table. American supply dumps stretch for kilometers behind enemy lines, mountains of material that grow larger every day instead of smaller. Ammunition stacks rise like industrial warehouses. Fuel dumps cover areas larger than German cities. Meanwhile, Luttwitz's own supply situation grows more desperate daily. His panzer regiment is down to 40% strength due to lack of spare parts. His artillery has been rationed to 5 shells per gun per day. His infantry divisions are sharing rifles because replacement weapons aren't available. The Americans aren't fighting a military campaign. They're conducting an industrial operation with military objectives. Coming up, the moment mathematics killed the Wehrmacht, Day 1 of Red Ball Express, 21,000 tons delivered to forward units. Day 2, 23,000 tons. Day 3, 24,000 tons. By the end of the first week, Red Ball convoys are delivering more supplies in 24 hours than the Wehrmacht receives in a month. German supply convoys, when they can operate at all, crawl through the countryside at night carrying perhaps 50 tons per run. Americans deliver that much every 4 minutes. The equation wasn't close. It was mathematical annihilation. August 10th, 8:30 hours. Private First Class Robert Johnson downshifts his GMC truck as he navigates another bomb crater on Route N158. The Germans have been trying to interdict Red Ball convoys with air attacks and artillery, but the Americans simply route around damage and keep moving. Johnson has been driving for 18 hours straight, catching catnaps during fuel stops. In the passenger seat, Corporal Samuel Williams checks their cargo manifest. 5 tons of medical supplies for the 6th Armored Division. Grid 445223, ETA 11:15 hours. Johnson nods, checking his mirrors to ensure proper spacing with the truck behind him. The convoy discipline is absolute. 60 feet between vehicles, 35 miles per hour, no deviations from assigned routes. Military precision applied to industrial-scale logistics. Behind them, the convoy extends beyond the horizon. Thousands of vehicles carrying ammunition, fuel, food, spare parts, medical supplies, everything an army needs to fight at maximum tempo. Johnson knows that somewhere ahead, American tank crews are counting on his cargo to stay alive. The irony isn't lost on him. He couldn't carry a rifle in combat, but now he's carrying the medical supplies that will save combat soldiers' lives. August 11th, 16:45 hours. Oberst Heinrich Müller, German supply officer for the 352nd Infantry Division, stares at requisition forms that read like mathematical impossibilities. His division needs 200 tons of supplies per day to operate effectively. His actual allocation, 40 tons per week, when transportation is available. Meanwhile, intercepted American radio traffic describes supply abundance that defies comprehension. American units are complaining about storage problems. Too many supplies arriving too quickly, equipment being abandoned because newer equipment is arriving faster than old equipment can be moved forward. Mueller drafts a report that will be dismissed as defeatist. American supply superiority has made conventional defensive operations impossible. Enemy material abundance exceeds our consumption capacity by factors we cannot calculate. Recommend immediate strategic withdrawal to positions where enemy logistics burden increases. The report disappears into Wehrmacht bureaucracy. Red Ball keeps rolling. August 12th, 03:15 hours. The German listening post near Rambouillet intercepts American radio communications that sound more like factory production reports than military traffic. Obergefreiter Weber, promoted after his accurate convoy assessments, transcribes conversations between American supply officers. Red Ball control to Station 7. Today's tonnage delivery exceeded quota by 12%. Operational tempo maintained across all routes. No significant delays reported. Weber pauses his transcription to calculate the implications. If American daily supply tonnage exceeds their quotas, and their quotas are already larger than German weekly allocations, then the mathematical gap is widening exponentially. The Americans aren't just winning, they're accelerating away from German supply capacity at industrial speed. In X seconds, everything changed. August 13th, 11:15 hours. Staff Sergeant Washington pulls his truck into the supply dump at Chartres, exactly on schedule after 16 hours of continuous driving. Around him, hundreds of other Red Bull drivers are unloading thousands of tons of supplies under the supervision of Quartermaster Corps personnel, who seem amazed by the abundance flowing through their depot. "Sergeant Washington," calls Master Sergeant Thompson, the depot chief. "Your ammunition delivery puts us over quota for the week, and it's only Monday." Washington grins as he climbs down from his cab. "Sarge, we got 4 more trucks behind me, carrying the same load. Y'all better find somewhere to put it." The abundance is overwhelming, even to the Americans. Supply officers who spent months scrounging for basic necessities are now filing complaints about storage shortages. The Red Bull Express hasn't just solved the logistics crisis, it's created a logistics surplus that American planners never imagined possible. August 14th, 19:30 hours. General Omar Bradley and General George Patton stand in Bradley's command tent, studying supply reports that read like industrial production summaries rather than military logistics. In 10 days, the Red Bull Express has delivered 243,000 tons of supplies, more than the entire European theatre consumed in any previous month. "George," Bradley says, setting down the latest tonnage report, "how's your fuel situation?" Patton grins. "Brad, I've got so much gasoline I could drive to Berlin and back twice. My tank commanders are complaining they can't find space to store all the fuel we're receiving." "What about ammunition?" "More than we can shoot in 6 months. My artillery officers are requesting permission to conduct harassment fires because we're running out of storage space for incoming shells." The conversation lasts 60 seconds, but it represents a fundamental shift in military planning. For the first time in military history, an army is limited not by logistics, but by the physical impossibility of consuming supplies faster than they can be delivered. August 15th, 11:33 hours. General Gunther Blumentritt studies the morning intelligence reports at Army Group B headquarters. American fuel deliveries have increased by 400% in 2 weeks. Their ammunition expenditure suggests unlimited supply. German reconnaissance reports describe American supply dumps that stretch for kilometers, mountains of supplies that grow larger every day instead of smaller. Blumentritt sets down the reports and walks to his situation map. Red pins mark German positions, blue pins mark American advances, green pins mark American supply dumps. The green pins outnumber the red pins by 4 to 1 and cover twice as much territory. "Mein Gott," he whispers to his aide. "They're not running out, they're accelerating." His operations officer approaches with the weekly German supply summary. Fuel allocation for Army Group B, down 30% from last month. Ammunition stockpile, below critical threshold for the 6th consecutive week. Vehicle readiness, 37%, and falling due to lack of spare parts. Blumentritt compares these numbers to American supply intercepts. The mathematical contrast is so stark, it seems like the reports describe different wars, different armies, different industrial capabilities entirely. Then everything changed. August 16th, 06:45 hours. The intelligence was overwhelming, but the implications were even more devastating. Red Bull Express was delivering an average of 26,000 tons of supplies daily across 500 miles of French countryside. 1 truck every 14 seconds on the main routes. 5,900 vehicles in constant motion. The American supply line wasn't fragile. It was a mechanical hurricane that consumed German resistance by simply outlasting it through pure abundance. German panzer divisions that had terrified Europe were reduced to scavenging spare parts from knocked-out vehicles because replacement parts weren't available. American armored units were abandoning perfectly functional tanks because newer models were arriving faster than old ones could be maintained. The war had become a contest between German scarcity and American abundance, and mathematics doesn't negotiate. But what happened next finished the job. August 17th, 14:20 hours. Patton's tanks roll again. Fuel tanks topped off. Ammunition racks full. The brief fuel shortage that halted Third Army for 6 days is ancient history. Now his armoured spearheads are averaging 60 miles per day across France, supported by a supply system that delivers everything they need exactly when they need it. Tank crews report embarrassing abundance. More fuel than they can burn. More ammunition than they can fire, more spare parts than they can use. Maintenance officers file complaints about supply surpluses clogging their depots. The logistics tail that was supposed to limit American mobility has become a logistics tsunami that drowns German resistance. German defensive positions that seemed impregnable on Monday are bypassed on Tuesday and surrounded on Wednesday. Wehrmacht units find themselves cut off not by American tactical brilliance, but by American logistical abundance. Every German strongpoint is eventually isolated and starved out because the Americans can afford to go around any obstacle. The psychological effect on German troops is devastating. They watch endless streams of American vehicles and realize they're fighting an enemy with unlimited resources. Their own supply situation grows more desperate by the day. Ammunition rationed to 20 rounds per rifle. Fuel so scarce that vehicles are abandoned for lack of gasoline. Spare parts so rare that 3 broken vehicles are cannibalized to keep one operational. August 18th, 21:45 hours. Captain Jean-Claude Moreau of the French Resistance meets with Major Richardson, an American supply officer, in the liberated town of Dreux. Richardson spreads maps across a cafe table, pointing to potential supply routes with the enthusiasm of an industrial engineer. "Captain, we need every road, every cart path, every goat trail that can handle a 2.5-ton truck," Richardson explains. "We're moving more tonnage through France than the French railway system moved in peacetime." Moreau studies the maps with amazement. The Americans aren't just supplying their armies, they're rebuilding the entire transportation infrastructure of Western France to handle industrial-scale logistics. Roads are being improved, bridges reinforced, alternate routes surveyed and prepared. They're fighting a war of abundance against an enemy reduced to desperate scarcity. "Monsieur Major," Moreau says, "the Germans are rationing individual rifle cartridges, while you complain about storage space for excess supplies. This is not war as we have known it." Richardson nods grimly. "Captain, we're not fighting the same war the Germans are fighting. They're fighting World War II. We're fighting an industrial war with World War II tactics." Coming up, the moment German commanders realized they were fighting mathematics, not just military forces. August 20th, 08:30 hours. Obergefreiter Weber, now the senior intelligence analyst for German intercepts of American supply communications, sits surrounded by transcripts that read like industrial production reports. 3 weeks of intercepted Red Bull radio traffic has revealed the scope of American logistics operations that dwarf anything in military history. Weber has created charts tracking American supply deliveries that look like exponential growth curves rather than military logistics. Daily tonnage delivered, weekly totals achieved, monthly projections exceeded. Every metric shows American supply capacity expanding faster than German consumption could theoretically absorb, even if they captured every American depot. His latest report to divisional intelligence concludes with a paragraph that he knows will be dismissed. American supply operations represent industrial warfare applied to military objectives. Enemy logistics capacity exceeds German consumption by factors that make conventional resistance mathematically impossible. The report gets filed. Weber keeps intercepting American radio traffic that describes abundance beyond his ability to comprehend. August 22nd, 15:45 hours, Lieutenant Hans Kruger leads a 12-man German patrol through the Forêt des Couves, hunting for American supply convoys vulnerable to ambush. His mission parameters are simple: interdict enemy logistics operations through small unit actions. The reality is more complex. Kruger's patrol has been hunting for 4 days without engaging a single target. Not because there are no American convoys, but because every American convoy is too large to attack safely. Every road carries hundreds of vehicles. Every supply route is guarded by dedicated security forces with superior firepower. Through his binoculars, Kruger watches Route D235 carry a continuous stream of American trucks toward the front. He counts vehicles for 30 minutes before giving up. The convoy has no visible beginning or end. His 12 rifles against hundreds of trucks escorted by mounted machine guns represents mathematical suicide, not military tactics. The patrol melts back into the forest. Small unit operations have become impossible when the enemy has unlimited resources and overwhelming abundance. August 25th, 07:22 hours. The German fuel depot at Reims burns after American fighter bombers catch a supply convoy in broad daylight. Oberst Heinrich Müller surveys the wreckage and makes calculations that chill his blood. This convoy represented 5 days of fuel for his entire sector, 120 tons of precious gasoline that took weeks to accumulate and transport. Radio reports from forward positions paint a devastating picture. American tanks are operating at maximum tempo with no fuel conservation measures. American aircraft fly continuous support missions with no apparent fuel limitations. American vehicles idle their engines during maintenance stops because fuel abundance makes conservation unnecessary. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Muller's radio man approaches with intercepts from American communications. Fuel supplies exceed consumption by 40%. Request permission to establish additional forward dumps to handle surplus deliveries. Surplus deliveries. Müller stares at the burning wreckage of 5 days' worth of fuel for his sector, while American units complain about too much fuel arriving too quickly. The mathematical impossibility of the situation makes conventional military thinking irrelevant. His report to division headquarters is dismissed as defeatist. Enemy supply capability exceeds our consumption by incalculable factors. Conventional defensive operations are mathematically impossible under current logistics differential. Wehrmacht bureaucracy files the report away. Red ball keeps rolling. August 28th, 12:15 hours. Staff Sergeant Washington makes his 47th Red Ball Express run, delivering his latest load of supplies to American forces now advancing into Belgium. His odometer shows 18,000 miles driven in 24 days, more distance than most civilian drivers cover in 18 months. Behind him, the mechanical rhythm continues. The Red Ball Express operates with industrial precision now, one convoy rolling east while another convoy rolls west for resupply simultaneously. The roads never empty. The tonnage never stops flowing. Washington climbs down from his cab at a forward supply dump and surveys the abundance surrounding him. Mountains of ammunition stacked like industrial warehouses, fuel depots that stretch beyond the horizon, medical supplies enough to stock civilian hospitals, spare parts in quantities that exceed immediate consumption by factors of 10. 3 months ago, he was told he wasn't fit for combat roles. Now, he's delivered 235 tons of critical supplies across 18,000 miles of contested territory. The army that questioned his courage has become dependent on that courage for its continued existence. Coming up, the intercept that broke German morale forever. September 1st, 23:18 hours. The German listening post at Senlis intercepts American radio traffic that sounds more like factory production reports than military communications. Red Ball control to all stations. Daily tonnage delivered 6,400 tons. Weekly total 42,800 tons. Mission parameters exceeded by 18%. 6,400 tons in 1 day, 42,800 tons in 1 week. The entire German 7th Army receives 800 tons per week when transportation is available. Obergefreiter Weber does the mathematics that have become his obsession. American daily supply delivery exceeds German weekly supply allocation by a factor of 8 to 1. American weekly delivery exceeds German monthly allocation by a factor of 5 to 1. The Americans aren't just winning the logistics war, they're operating on a completely different mathematical scale of industrial capacity. The intercepted message passes through German intelligence channels like a numerical virus. Each headquarters that receives it runs the same calculation. American supply tonnage versus German supply tonnage. The ratio defies comprehension and grows worse every day. At OKW, staff officers create charts that look like exponential growth curves. American supply capability climbing geometrically, while German capability declines arithmetically. The mathematical gap has become too large to bridge through conventional military means. September 3rd, 1630 hours. General Heinz Guderian receives the weekly Wehrmacht supply summary at his headquarters in East Prussia. The document is 4 pages of mathematical impossibilities. Fuel allocation for all German forces in the West, down 40% from August levels. Ammunition production, 60% below consumption rates for 8 consecutive weeks. Vehicle readiness across all armored units, 32%, and falling due to chronic spare parts shortages. He compares these figures to intelligence reports about American supply operations intercepted by German signals intelligence. The mathematical contrast is so extreme, it seems like the reports describe different wars fought by different species with different industrial capabilities. American units are filing complaints about logistics abundance. German units are dissolving due to logistics scarcity. The Americans have too much of everything. The Germans have too little of anything. Guderian understands operational art, tactical innovation, and strategic planning, but he's never encountered industrial logistics applied as a weapon of war. The Americans have turned supply operations into a form of warfare more devastating than their artillery, more decisive than their air power, more psychologically destructive than their propaganda. This wasn't war anymore. It was arithmetic, and arithmetic doesn't accept surrender. September 5th, 11:45 hours. The final statistics of the Red Ball Express tell a story that military historians will study for decades. 193 tons of supplies delivered across 500 miles of contested territory in 81 days of continuous operations. An average of 5,086 tons per day, maintained through combat conditions, enemy interdiction, and logistical challenges that would have stopped any previous military supply operation in history. Staff Sergeant Washington completes his final Red Ball run, delivering medical supplies to American forces crossing the German border. His personal statistics mirror the larger operation. 28,000 miles driven, 347 tons of supplies delivered, 0 loads lost to enemy action. Behind him, other drivers continue the mechanical rhythm that has become the heartbeat of American logistics. The Red Ball Express officially ends, but its principles continue. American supply operations have established mathematical superiority so overwhelming that German resistance becomes a question of arithmetic rather than military capability. September 12th, 14:55 hours. The last official Red Ball convoy crosses into Germany, but the mechanical tsunami continues under different operational names. Behind the convoy lies the transformation of military logistics from an operational concern into an industrial weapon. Ahead lies German territory, defended by soldiers who haven't received adequate supplies in months. The Wehrmacht's daily situation reports tell the story in mathematical terms that admit no interpretation. Fuel availability, 12% of minimum operational requirements. Ammunition stocks, critical shortages across all categories for 9 consecutive weeks. Vehicle readiness, 28% and declining due to complete absence of replacement parts. Medical supplies, exhausted in forward positions. Food supplies, below subsistence levels throughout Army Group B. Meanwhile, American logistical reports describe abundance so overwhelming that it creates storage problems rather than supply problems. Equipment is being abandoned, not because it's damaged, but because newer equipment arrives faster than old equipment can be processed forward. Supply officers trained to scrounge for basic necessities are now filing complaints about surplus materiel clogging their depots. German generals who mocked American logistics in July are surrendering their commands in September. Not because they were outmaneuvered tactically, but because they were mathematically overwhelmed logistically. The Red Ball Express didn't just support Patton's breakout, it made German resistance arithmetically impossible. The equation had flipped, and the Wehrmacht never recovered. September 15, 1930 hours. In prisoner of war compounds across liberated France, the same German field commanders who laughed at American supply lines in July sit behind barbed wire, listening to the distant rumble of American convoys still rolling eastward toward the Rhine. The mechanical thunder never stops. Day and night, the sound of American abundance rolling toward Berlin with mathematical inevitability. Oberst Miller, the former supply officer who watched depot after depot burn while Americans complained about surplus storage, stares through barbed wire at an American supply dump that covers more territory than his hometown in Bavaria. Mountains of ammunition rising like industrial warehouses, rivers of fuel flowing through pipelines that dwarf civilian infrastructure. Medical supplies stacked in quantities that could supply civilian hospitals for years. Beside him, Captain Hoffman, the intelligence officer who first dismissed reports of American convoy sizes, watches American soldiers casually discarding equipment that German troops would fight to obtain. Perfectly functional vehicles abandoned because newer models are arriving faster than old ones can be maintained. Ammunition discarded because storage space is needed for incoming supplies that exceed consumption capacity. Mein Gott, Wilhelm, Muller whispers. They didn't just defeat us. They buried us in abundance. The joke, it turns out, was on them. The Americans hadn't just built superior supply lines. They'd constructed an industrial war machine that turned logistics into a weapon more decisive than tanks, more devastating than artillery, more psychologically crushing than any battlefield defeat. Mathematics had won the war before the final battles were even fought. September 18th, 102:30 hours. The final irony plays out in darkness across German-occupied Europe. Wehrmacht units retreat toward the fatherland with empty fuel tanks, exhausted ammunition, and no prospect of resupply. Behind them, American supply convoys roll forward through the night with headlights blazing, carrying abundance toward armies that already have more supplies than they can consume. The equation had flipped completely. German commanders who once mocked American logistics now understand that they were never fighting American tactics or American soldiers or American equipment. They were fighting American mathematics, industrial production capacity applied to military objectives with relentless arithmetic precision. And mathematics, as every German general now realized in the darkness of defeat, was a war they never had any chance of winning. The Red Ball Express had delivered more than supplies to the front lines. It had delivered mathematical proof that industrial abundance trumps military skill, that logistic superiority decides campaigns before tactics become relevant, that modern war is won in factories and supply depots rather than on battlefield. The same German commanders who laughed at fragile American supply lines now sit in prisoner-of-war compounds, listening to the distant rumble of Red Ball convoys still rolling eastward into the Reich. The mechanical thunder grows louder each night, the sound of 6,000 trucks carrying American abundance toward Berlin, fueled by industrial capacity that German planners never imagined possible. The joke, it turns out, was on them. And the punchline was 412,193 tons of supplies delivered with mathematical precision that made German resistance not just impossible, but arithmetically irrelevant. The equation had flipped, and 5 million German soldiers were about to discover what American industrial abundance looked like when it arrived with bayonets fixed, tanks fueled, and artillery supplied for the final drive to victory.